Hello again, me again with another story. um, I got made redundant when I was 29 and had the opportunity to move to Australia with my company, but I declined the offer because I love the UK and, well, I decided to stay. This is my attempts or story about the attempts of me getting another job. Some of it's true, obviously a bit exaggerated some parts because it's a story, but the gist of it is pretty true. It's called What's a Job Worth? Written by me, read by me, copyright by me, Al Donaldson. I hope you enjoy. I was 15 minutes early, and I certainly didn't want to be late for this job interview. All done up in my best bib and tucker. My shirt was a little tight around the collar, and there was a likelihood that the button would ping off. Yes, the receptionist said without looking up. I've a job interview at 11:15. Name? I was irritated. She couldn't even bother to look at me. Donaldson. First name? Why? Have you got more than one? It's a pretty uncommon name in the South. Tell me who they are. We may be related. The receptionist ignored my sarcasm and gestured towards the door. I complied. As I opened the door, a bevy of heads turned towards me. I'm not sure if the collective noun for a number of heads is a bevy, but it should be. 9 heads turned in my direction. 2 nodded, to which I nodded back. 2 smiled. I smiled back, but wasn't sure why. I found a seat at the far end. If all these people were before me, how long was I going to have to wait? I turned to the person next to me. What time's your appointment? 11. The woman nearest the door said, my time was 9. So what's the delay? I asked. No one's bothered to tell us, said someone. There was a flurry of conversations, and 9:15, 9:30, and 10 o'clock got up and left. 5 seconds later, 10:15 got up, and while the door was open, I could hear the receptionist say, but you can't go. The interviews will be starting soon. To which 10:15 said, tell him to stuff it. I stifled a laugh, and true to her word, the interviews began, and eventually it was my turn. I must admit I was a little nervous. I thought I had my dream job for life at Hurst and Parsons, and I'd never have to look for another one. Take a seat, Mr. Donaldson. There were 3 of them. I'm Mr. Peters. I'm head of personnel. Mr. Peters had the biggest pair of ears I'd ever seen on anyone. I bet you're no good at running, I thought. All that wind resistance. Best not go out on a windy day. You could take off. He indicated to his left. This is Miss Barnes. Muzz Barnes, she corrected him. Sorry, Muzz Barnes. Muzz Barnes looked like a heavyweight wrestler, but she tried to counter the look by wearing a flowery feminine dress to emphasize her femininity. She added a ribbon to her hair. And this is, indicating to his right, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas had an exceedingly large pimple on the end of his nose and hid it by holding a handkerchief over it. Every now and then, when he thought no one was looking, he gave it a sneaky squeeze and then looked into his hanky to see if he had been successful. Now then, Mr. Donaldson, why do you want to work for Harrison, Tweed and Dunwoody? Well, it's a job I know I can do very well. Before I could finish, Muzz Barnes rattled off a question like a machine gun. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? What sort of question's that? who knows what's around the corner? I mean to say, if someone had asked my previous employer, Mr. Hurst, that question, would he have answered, I'll have embezzled all the company's cash and run off with Mr. Parsons' wife? And the same question to Mr. Parsons wouldn't have gleaned that Mr. Parsons, now wifeless and without a business or funds, had sat in his car in his garage with the engine running. Hence why I was now jobless. Hopefully making money for Harwood, Tweed and Dunwoody, I answered. All three scribbled something on their notepads. I hoped it was positive. Mr. Thomas's question threw me for 6. If you were a Muppet, which one would you be and why? Bloody hell, what is this? Don't you want to know about my qualities? I held a position successfully at Hurst and Parsons for 5 years. I introduced new working practices that not only speeded up production, but saved the company 35% in waste. I suggested they pass on some of the savings to the staff, which they did, and it gave us a happy and more productive workforce. You haven't answered the question, said Mr. Thomas. If you were a Muppet, which one would you be and why? These people were nuts. Kermit, I answered. And why? Because he's green. Ah, said Mr. Thomas, and all three scribbled into their notepads. And what is your favourite colour? Mr. Peters asked. Blue. Blue? Not green? No, I like blue. But you said you'd be Kermit because he was green, said Ms. Barnes. And they all scribbled on their notepads. This was becoming surreal. But you don't get blue frogs? Ah, yes, said Mr. Thomas. Scribble, scribble. Now then, just one more question. I hoped that they were going to ask me what I could offer. I'd spent a good 3 days looking at the firm and looking at how I could help streamline their business. Just as I had for my last firm, I reckon I could save them thousands. Do you know why manhole covers are round? It was then that I went blank. I remember Ms. Barnes saying to Mr. Peters, I must object. For a minute I thought, good for you, girl. What a twat of a question. But she went on to say, manhole covers is a sexist description. They should be referred to as inspection hatches. Mr. Peters apologised profusely, and they all turned to me for an answer. I haven't a clue, I said. They thanked me, and I got up and left. As I passed the receptionist, she said, we'll let you know in due course. Needless to say, I didn't get the job. And that is how it went on, interview after interview. If I wasn't asked which Muppet I'd like to be, they asked, what do you dread about your work? Or, what's the colour of success? I was asked at one interview, what was the most traumatic experience to happen in your personal life? I nearly answered job interviews. This went on for weeks and weeks, all through the summer, until at an interviewer asked, what biscuit would you be if you were a biscuit? Oh, I'd had it. It had nothing to do with anything that was relevant. Are you joking? I asked, and I swore under my breath. This caused consternation with the interviewing panel. They had never had anyone question them before. I don't eat biscuits. Ask me another. It was then that I realised where I had been going wrong and why it always seemed we were on different wavelengths. There was a rustling of papers and someone asked, "If you were a Muppet, which one would you be?" Luckily, they'd not wanted to know why. "Eva Vestoff," I answered in confidence. "Eva Vestoff?" "Yes, Eva Vestoff." One of them rifled through some papers and stared for a good 20 seconds. Jesus, they'd got a list of Muppet characters. "No, she's not a Muppet character. She is," I lied. "Your list is wrong. Eva Vestoff was a Russian striptease artist that only appeared briefly. She was deemed as inappropriate for a children's television program and dropped." There was a lot of murmuring and rustling of papers. The guy with the list started to write it down. "How do you spell Vestoff?" "I've no idea. Lists would be updated and Eva Vestoff would eventually become a full member of the Muppet Gang." "Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?" asked one of the panel. Oh, grief, that old chestnut. "In my spare time, I am leader of a new political party. In 5 years, I will be elected to Parliament. Once we have won all the seats, I will cancel all elections and assume the role of head of state." "But we have a head of state." "Yes, for the moment. When I take over, they will be forced into exile." One of the panel laughed sarcastically and said, "How are you going to manage that in 5 years' time?" Go for it, I thought. What have I got to lose? They looked intrigued. "I'll have my men go around in the middle of the night and bang on people's doors to get them to vote for me." "In the middle of the night? Some people will get very upset if you do that." "Then they will be the people that get a good kicking. The word will spread, and after a while everyone will comply." "What about the police? The security service, won't they stop you?" "They'll be paid off by my sponsors." This was sounding good, plausible even. Amazing, as I just thought of it. "So why do you want to work for us?" someone asked. At last, a sensible question, but all the sensible answers had gone out the window. "The reason I want to work for your company is that when I take over the country, this firm will be at the forefront for all the contracts that will be handed out." I was enjoying talking bollocks. The head of the panel asked if I would step outside for a minute, which I did. After a while, I became briefly concerned that they'd called security and I'd be escorted from the building. But I thought, so what? I was asked back, "We'd like to offer you the position." Well, you could have knocked me down with a feather. If someone talks bollocks to you and you answer in bollocks, at least you're on the same wavelength. And that's where I'd been going wrong. My one concern as I shook people's hands was, would any one of them be with the firm in 5 years' time? As time progressed and I assisted in streamlining the business, personnel would be seriously downsized. I warmed to my idea of taking over the country. Maybe I could start small and just invade the Isle of Man. I'd need to recruit. I'd need to ask them questions when I interviewed them. If you were a tea cake, would you like to be covered in butter or margarine? Yes, world domination could be just a step away. Hope you like that. A lot of those questions were actually true. It was the time of Sloane Rangers and all sorts of strange people who didn't know what the hell to ask questions at interviews, so they came up with all this absolute gobbledygook and claptrap. Anyway, if you liked it, please click like and subscribe and share. I'll be very, very grateful. And I'll see you next time. All the best to you now. Thanks. Bye-bye.